Hello. So, talking about Raj Kapoor, almost everybody knows or remembers him. The famous songs, Mera Joota Hai Japani, Patloon Englistani, or Awara Hoon, and all that. But before we go into a detailed discussion of Raj Kapoor, I would like to talk a little bit about what Ravi Vasudevan describes as the melodramatic mode of commercial Hindi cinema. So what he says is that the commercial Hindi cinema and the melodrama especially is is created by a non-psychological motivation, that is, it is couched upon coincidences, and there is kind of a irregular plotting, something like there would be songs, there would be comic sequences, and there would be a lot of subplots which are there with the main plot. Also, you know, there would be hyperbolic action, there would be rhetorical dialogues, and in particular, a pattern of storytelling where initially there is a misrecognition that you consider somebody to be poor, but eventually, let's say, for example, you figure out this person is rich, and that kind of a narrative structure where there is initially misrecognition followed by recognition in the end. So, what, to quote him, he says that the melodramatic mode is a shifting discursive field. It's a shifting kind of, it constantly shifts and changes. Shifting discursive field which incorporates philosophical and ethical expression. The question of morality is very, very important. And there is emotional excess, there's comedy, there's song, there's dance, which produce melodrama. Hindi melodramas, there are, especially if you're thinking of the post-independence, and that's very important, that is very crucial. That's like the foundation stone of popular Hindi cinema, where you will see that there are certain forbidden fears, as Vasudevan describes. There is also the pleasure of the new. And that is very important. There is a pleasure, there's an excitement about the new, and there is this fear also about the new. So there are these, the stories, there you would have the father figure, the fear of the father, the fear of the woman often. And there would be this kind of a problem between the old patriarchy and the new emergent patriarchy. So there would be polarity between good and bad, west and east, and so on. The question of this identity, especially the modern citizen, the new citizen of India, is very, very crucial. So going back to Raj Kapoor, you will see that some of the major themes, and this is very interesting, something that emerges from Kismet, from the Bombay Talkies film, one of the biggest hit of the period, the 40s, from the war context, you will have for the first time, or let's say one of the early, examples of the thief as the protagonist. You have thieves, you have Avara, you have Sri Charsobis, and so on. Some of the major themes, therefore, in Raj Kapoor's films would be joblessness and corruption. Awara 1951 is a film that has been talked about. It is also a film that was recognized in the Cannes Film Festival, following which it traveled the world. In fact, it's a cult in Turkey. There are Turkish versions of Avara, and Avara has been quoted in films like Platform, in East Asian films like Platform, and in many other non-Indian films. Avara, therefore, everybody knows about Avara's popularity in Soviet Russia, and this circulation of Avara in particular across, let's say, Asia and Europe is something that can be studied separately. But going back to Avara, this story about what is kind of the premise of the story is a concern of the new nation. The judge Raghunath believes that a person who is a thief, his son cannot be an honest person. So Jagga, the villain, he abducts the wife, and eventually when the son is born, he abducts the son, and he is raised as a petty crook. Avara. And then you will find that the crisis sort of grows, in Avara, is that he is actually has not committed any crime. He is just a kind of a vagabond. And but the concern is about what the new nation is like. Is this secular system of law for the people? Does it understand our cultures, something with which the country was very close prior to the independence? So there you can, in fact, many film scholars have pointed out that there is a kind of a conflict between two kinds of modernity in many of these films.
आवारा हूँ आवारा हूँ या गर्दिश में हूँ आसमान का तारा हूँ आवारा हूँ आवारा हूँ या गर्दिश में हूँ आसमान का तारा हूँ आवारा हूँ
Ravi Vasudevan, talking about the Indian melodramas, he says that there are two kinds of plots. One is the renunciation plot that you will find in films like Devdas, where the character renounces the world and goes away. In films like Avara in particular, and many other films, Diwar for instance, you will find that there is a kind of a conflict. So there is this renunciation plot, the other is the plot of conflict. Avara would belong to this second category. The conflict is with the father figure. Not necessarily with the father, but father representing the judiciary, the law, the state. And there is a kind of intense conflict between these kind of patriarchal figures with the new citizen who has to now consider his position within this framework. One of the crucial scenes in Avara, in fact, is when Rita, fighting his case, played by Nargis, is this young lawyer who is saying that, who is pleading to Judge Raghunath, who is also both the real father of Raj Kapoor, also the real father of the character, and pleading to him that he is not guilty. It is at that point that now the character played by Raj Kapoor, he has escaped from jail and he's come to kill the judge. So it is, you can see that, there is at the story level, there is this conflict between the chore and the judge. But when you read it, when you read between the lines, when you read the scenes, when you read the way it is set up, the use of music, the dialogues, you find that it is far more complicated and there are layers. And these layers tells us about the complexity of the nation was going through.
आपने अपने बयान में मुल्जिम को जन्म का चोर डाकू चक्का कहा है। इससे आपका क्या मतलब?
मेरा मतलब है कि उसके रिकॉर्ड के मुताबिक वो बचपन से आवारा और बदमाश, अपराध की कीड़े जरूर उसे खून में अपने माँ बाप से मिले।
जैसा क्या आपकी कोई औलाद है?
नहीं, मगर इस सवाल के इस मुकदमे के साथ क्या ताल्लुक?
बहुत गहरा ताल्लुक है। फिर सोचकर जवाब दीजिए। क्या आपको यकीन है कि आपकी कोई औलाद नहीं?
नहीं, मगर मैं फिर कहता हूँ कि सवाल का।
क्या आप बता सकते हैं कि आपने कब और क्यों और किस हालत में अपनी बीवी को घर से निकाला था?
जनाबे वाला, क्या मुझे इन बेकार सवालों के जवाब देने के लिए मजबूर किया जाएगा?
रीता देवी, आप सिर्फ वो सवाल करें जिनका इस मुकदमा से ताल्लुक है। हम ये जानना चाहते हैं कि मुल्जिम ने हमला किया था या नहीं, और किया था तो क्यों?
बस बस बंद करो, मैं खूनी हूँ, मुझे फांसी देना है तो।
ऑर्डर।
A similar argument can be made about an earlier film, 1949 Barsat. Barsat is a really interesting film in the way it uses particularly music. It uses a particular variation of Hungarian Rhapsody, and there are as many as 4 scenes through which the narrative develops. Again, this is a story about these 2 young men who come to this kind of idyllic village in somewhere in the hills, and then they go away. So this girl, Reshma, played by Nargis again, and one of Nargis's first really popular film, and you find that when they are separated, so they fall in love at the point when this character Pran played by Raj Kapoor, plays violin, and this girl darts out of her house. She comes running, embraces the character, and she falls in love through this musical composition, as it were, through the playing of this musical composition. So there are 4 scenes, and it's very interesting the ways in which, by the use of music, Kapoor develops or extends the possibilities of melodramatic form. So there are scenes in which she comes, in fact, there is a very, very sort of enigmatic scene in which Raj, her marriage, Reshma's marriage, is being fixed to somebody else other than Pran, and Raj is in his house. He's playing the violin, and there's this beautiful high contrast images, and she comes running, darting. She darts in. There are these doors within doors kind of framing, and then she comes and embraces, and there is this very iconic shot of Raj Kapoor holding Nargis in one hand and the violin on the other, which is later, if you can understand, is taken up by Raj Kapoor, and its abstract form is used as the RK logo in the later films. So, what is important for us to understand the way Kapoor uses music to tell the story, and thereby is able to produce a particular kind of a narrative form, which is very, very important for Indian cinema.
क्या करते हो मियाँ? ऐसी खूबसूरत जवान लड़की की चुनरी इस तरह फेंकने की चीज है क्या?
हवा में उड़ता जाए मोरा लाल दुपट्टा मलमल का मोरा लाल दुपट्टा मलमल का हो जी
ये जो तुम तोते की तरह नए नए गीत रट लेती हो, जुमाने भी समझती हो क्या गा रही
हो? मुझे किसी से प्यार हो गया।
सच्चा प्यार ही दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा सहारा, मुझे किसी की जरूरत नहीं।
जिया बेकरार है, छाई बहार है, आजा मोरे बाल माँ तेरा इंतजार है।
प्यार बताने की नहीं, पाने की चीज है रेशमा।
तो तुम्हारा ख्याल है मैं कुछ समझती ही नहीं?
तुम्हें किसी शायर के दिल का हाल क्या मालूम? हमने तो एक ही सबक पाया प्यारे, कि लड़कियों की मोहब्बत एक वाहियात चीज है।
Talking about Sri Charsobis, in which Raj Kapoor again plays. Raj Kapoor, I must remind you, that is one of the few filmmakers who started his own production and became a producer and a director at a very early age of 24. So young Raj Kapoor was doing many things. He was performing, he was producing, he was directing. So it is clear that he had a particular kind of a cinema in mind. Think of Sri Charsobis. Sri Charsobis, is the story of, it opens with this young man who pawns his medal, the recognition of his education, and he takes money. Of course, the story then goes into that he goes into black marketing, and it is a reference, according to some of the film scholars, a reference to the black money that was entering the Indian scene, and so on. But it is also, it's a typical kind of a very interesting melodramatic kind of a structure of narration, in which you have very typical black and white female characters like Maya, played by Nadira, and Vidya, again played by Nargis. Raj Kapoor, of course, had a very long career. So there are phases. If his early phase was about, let's say, Avara and Sri Charsobis, at a later period, few years later in 56 and sometime around that, he was already making films like Jagte Raho, particularly Jagte Raho, which got international recognition. There is a very strong IPTA, Indian People's Theatre Association, connection with Raj Kapoor's films. And also it is important for us to remember that the progressive writer K. Abbas wrote many of his films. Abbas, I would like to remind the viewers, is that he was the maker, he was the director of the singular IPTA production Dharti Ke Lal. So, in a way, Kapoor belonged to this kind of a brigade, the kind of progressive, left-minded brigade, not necessarily communist, but left-minded indeed brigade, who had joined the film industry. And another example would be a film like Neecha Nagar by Chetan Anand. And you can see that many of the writers and many of the even musicians, composers, poets are working in these multiple films and producing a particular kind of a film culture. Also, there are the set of themes that are there, but also a set of iconography, very, very recognizable left iconography, the low angle shots, the backlight, the compositions of, that you compose multiple figures in a particular way. And these are very recognizable kind of imageries that were circulating through Kapoor's films. The other film that I would like to talk about is Teesri Kasam, which is produced by him, performed by him, is actually an adaptation of a short story, but its style, again, is a little different. Its style is more into realism, and the very well-known, eminent cinematographer Subroto Mitra did the camera for the film. So you have films like Jaagte Raho, which is very close to the IPTA ideology in the way it has this poor person who is just seeking for water. He enters this house, which is like a building, which is a gated house, a building, and he then just goes from one room to the other, just seeking for water, which he never gets, and everybody thinks that he's a thief. They are crying chor chor and so on. Teesri Kasam, on the other hand, is the story of this simple man, who falls in love with a performer, a dancer, and it is about the naivety, about the life, about the everyday of the rural life. So there you have a glimpse of the rural life told in a particular style, and the glimpse of the emergent urban life, which is drawing from various other kind of narrative cultures.
आज लैला मजनू होगा। लैला मजनू का किस्सा जानते हो ना?
जानता हूँ, लैला मजनू उर्फ मकतब की मोहब्बत।
आज मैं लैला बनूंगी।
और मजनू?
है कोई, जरूर आना, मारपीट करने नहीं, खेल देखने।
कोई आपकी बुराई करे तो?
तुम जरा जल्दी आ जाना, स्टेज पे बैठने का इंतजाम कर दूंगी तुम्हारा।
एक बात का गुस्सा तो नहीं कीजिएगा?
नहीं, बोलो।
बात यह है, मेले में चोर पॉकेटमार बहुत आते हैं।
सो तो आते हैं, फिर?
और देखिए, मैं बहुत गरीब आदमी हूँ, 1600 रुपया है, आप संभाल के रख लीजिए तो।
अगर मैं मार लूं तो?
So as mentioned earlier, Kapoor had a rather long career, and there are phases in his career, of his style of filmmaking. So there is this early phase, there is a kind of a more experimental phase in the middle, and then with the color in the 60s, in the mid-60s, early 70s, you have sort of Kapoor almost criticized for his more populist color films, a really, really important one being Sangam 1964. Sangam, as many of these scholars have discussed, particularly M. Madhava Prasad and Ranjani Mazumdar, they draw attention to the kind of emergent consumer culture to which Sangam was, in a way, playing to it, as it were. So Ranjani Mazumdar's essay in particular is talking about the ways in which Sangam is a kind of a very, very crucial example of the new kind of cultures that were emerging in the 60s. the world was opening up, as it were, for tourism. There was already cinema was, Hindi cinema in particular, had already become color. So there is a new energy, there's a new sort of one could say a new excitement about color cinema. And colors films meant that you go abroad, you shoot in a particular way, you show the world of consumption that is lying out there. But it was also, Sangam in particular, also talking about the new cultures of tourism, travel, and so on. For instance, Ranjini Majumdar says that, there is a whole lot of excitement that Sangam is offering. There is this wanderlust aesthetics that she refers to in Sangam, where you have the honeymoon couples, they are doing this window shopping. They're in Paris, they're doing window shopping, and there is therefore what she refers to as a touristic gaze to which is mobilized or which is evoked.
Mademoiselle, s'il vous plaît.
बहुत ठंड लग रही है।
Swimel cognac, please.
So, talking about Sangam, it was this very, very important, almost kind of a landmark film in the way it redefined the idea of Indian culture, about the pleasures that cinema could offer, the ways in which it was asking the viewer to participate in this worldwide tourism. In fact, if you look into the advertisements, you will see that they were advertised as that the three characters, these three shared immortal love, but the images that were there used for the publicity were images of Eiffel Tower and how they were traveling the world. It was a new world. There were images of London's Big Ben, there was this Leaning Tower of Pisa, there was this Eiffel Tower, as I mentioned. So there is this sort of a, an excitement about travel. There were the mechanisms of travel, the jet age, the post-war jet age was offering these kind of excitements. It was asking the Indian citizen to reorganize itself, as it were, and participate in this worldwide kind of a emergent consumption culture. So that Sangam is a representative of that kind of a culture in which you have the world laid before you for your consumption. And the other thing which is important is the use of the color. I would like to point that also. So Sangam became one of the biggest hits of the decade, as pointed out by Ranjini Majumdar. And a huge amount of foreign exchange was earned through his overseas releases.
दो ही तो सहारे हैं मेरी जिंदगी के, गोपाल की दोस्ती और तुम्हारा प्यार, दोनों में से एक भी ना हो तो जीना मुश्किल हो जाए।
गोपाल, मैं तुमसे प्यार करती हूँ, तुम।
So Raj Kapoor's films, created this network of overseas releases, beginning from Avara and then also with Sangam. So Sangam has been discussed also in length with reference to the censorship debate. I shall not go into that, but however, I will conclude by saying that Raj Kapoor remains probably one of the most, if not the most, at least one of the most important filmmakers of Indian cinema, in the way he had a very long career, in the way he performed, he produced, he directed a number of films, and the ways he shifted and in a way, therefore, almost negotiated the transformations of the nation.